Well, there are over 16 million women travelers out there today and throughout the year, and they now have a wonderful resource to make their lives a little easier, and that is the Woman Road Warrior. And here to help us with these tips is Kathleen Amici, and I appreciate you being here today to talk about this and to give these gals some tips. And you said a little earlier that when you were starting out, there wasn't a book like this, and all these questions and things that you had throughout the years that you've gathered this knowledge, you finally grouped them together for a book. And so when you were starting out, what were some of the things that you initially started jotting down and realizing that I need to learn more?
Well, when I first started out, I went on an assignment that was supposed to be 3 months long, and I ended up getting off the road 5 years later. Oh. And that was Monday through Friday grind, the true road warrior. And we had gotten a book on how to dress for success, but anything about how to travel. And what I realized is that I had put on 15 pounds in the first 3 months. I didn't have a social life. I wasn't sure what I was doing in the organization. And I would have liked to have had a mentor or somebody to turn around and ask a question to of how exactly am I supposed to be doing this? How come I'm getting rotten rooms? Why is that person in first class and I'm not? And so I just started taking notes, and it's been a accumulation of 20 plus years of being on the road and taking notes, and not only my story, but story of other businesswomen as well.
And so was there a lot of dialogue between you and the other businesswomen on, well, yeah, and just kind of you realizing you had the same question or didn't quite know why they were sitting up there, you were back here, or why did they just go into that lounge and I'm still out here by the bathroom here, you know, so.
Very much so. We had, when I first went through and I wrote the book, I had a focus group, and the focus group was primarily people that had traveled for a long time, same age group as I was. And what was great to me is everyone kept saying, boy, I wish I had this when I first started to travel. Mm-hmm. Because we all stumbled by ourselves, because even though you talk about 40+% women out there on the road now, when we started traveling there was nothing like that. There's been a 5,000% increase since the 70s when I started traveling. And so you didn't have a companion to turn around and say, well, am I doing this right or am I not doing that right? So we were kind of shaking our heads saying, yeah, you're right. I wish I had known that. And what's interesting is, even though it says a woman's guide to business travel, the book is cross-gender. It doesn't matter whether you're a business travel, leisure travel. My mother-in-law is 87. She just became a widow. She said, you know, I've learned so much from this book. And I don't think she was just saying that because I was her daughter-in-law. So
but it didn't hurt either.
No, it was very reassuring, very reassuring.
Well, I also noticed in the book that you talked with some like airline stewardesses and some people really in the know on if they were working with the airline industry, how to help out and make the travel easier. And how did you meet up with these women, or would you just stop them walking down the aisle and say, let me ask you a couple questions? I
wish I had thought of that, but I didn't. Yeah. I ended up, again, through talking with my peer group, and my travel agent, and I'm a big proponent of travel agents, has worked with me for over 20 years. So I called her, and she was a great resource for me, and she had some other people that I should talk to, and I did. And then I started asking people, and one person got me to another, and I got to the flight attendants, and I was able to get to a ticket counter agent and a gate agent, and learned, even after all the years I've been traveling, so much more from them. It was amazing. For instance, in the book is full of anecdotes and full of tips, and one of the tips I learned is that when you are traveling alone and you're going out for the night, to write down on a piece of paper and put on your desk if you're not with a colleague, or slip it under their door, that says where you're going, what time you left, and what you were wearing. So if anything should happen to you, somebody has a place to start to look. And that's what they teach the flight attendants. So I thought, if they're teaching the flight attendants that much safety, there really must be something to it, and it's not all in my head.
And a lot of it did deal with safety for the woman business traveler, and from everything from choosing the hotel and watch who's watching you when you're walking into the hotel or into your room, or if you don't feel comfortable, turn back around and go away. You know, and so it's just a lot of good advice along with that.
Thank you. That's, if you read any of the statistics and you read anybody doing any surveys, the #1 thing for a woman that's traveling, whether you're a businesswoman or a leisure traveler, is the safety. That's what we're most concerned about. And I have, through the years, had some very interesting experiences, not all great, when it came to safety, and I wanted to be able to impart that to everybody else. And I think that's one of the things that we learn when we're on the road so much, is that you can say no, and it's okay. And you can challenge the norm, and that's okay. And as long as you do it on an assertive, not aggressive level, and you need to learn that, you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck, and you're going to be a lot happier traveler.
So no with a smile, but keep it firm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And humor gets you a long way.
Yeah.
Humor gets you a real long way. I had the unfortunate experience one night showing up at a hotel at midnight after a long night of travel, and the hotel didn't have a room for me, even though I had a reservation. Well, I didn't handle it very well, and I started yelling and screaming at the hotel desk clerk, and you know, it wasn't his fault. He didn't say, oh, I'm not going to let Kathy have a room, this will be great. So I calmed down enough to talk to a manager, and when I took it to have a different approach, I was much happier. I was upgraded to a different room at a different hotel, and it was a better one. And they paid. So it was win-win all the way around.
Win-win all the way around.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, very
exactly.
good.
That is one key tip, that if you have a room and they don't have any room for you because of circumstances, you don't necessarily have to pay for the new room that you're going to in a different hotel.
And when you finally started writing the book and you got your focus group together, you probably at that time still had a pretty good handle on travel and business travel and what to do and what not to do. But did anything really surprise you when you started putting the book together and listening to other advice, like, oh yeah, even after 20 years you're thinking, oh, there's something else new I didn't know?
Oh sure.
Yeah.
I think I learn something new every day, and I think most travelers do if you pay attention. Again, the tip about staying in, when you're staying by yourself and writing down where you're going. Another great tip was, I had checked my luggage every so often, but one of the gate agents for a major airline said, put a copy of your itinerary in your luggage so that if the tag should come off, which of course happens, they will eventually go into your luggage and they'll see your itinerary, know where you're going, and write a bag to you quicker. I had never even never even thought about doing that after 20 plus years of travel. So we've learned, I keep learning tips, and so do other people. And
it all kind of starts with not the travel itself, but preparing to leave. You got to set up your flight, your hotel arrangements, kind of where you're going to stay once you get there. And you mentioned a little before, you're a proponent of travel agents, but also if your company has a person in charge of the travel. So if you get the assignment, Ken, you got to go to Omaha, and you're leaving in a week or in a month or whatever. Where do I start getting this trip together to make it a successful trip?
Well, if you're a business person, and you did mention about the inside travel agent, so you would go there to begin with and have them book your travel, because you typically, if you work for a large corporation, they're going to have a corporate rate at a hotel. They're going to have a preferred provider for a car, a hotel, and an airplane. So that's it's a no-brainer. You go to them, they'll say, okay, fine. If you're doing it on your own, you have a choice of going to the major websites and looking up what your options are, which I have a tendency to do a lot, and then I may call the airline directly and make my plane reservation and other reservations, or I will call my travel agent. The reason I like to use a travel agent is the fact that I call myself a high-maintenance traveler, unfortunately, and I'm always changing things when I'm on the road. And so it's much easier for me to pick up a phone and talk to somebody that I know and knows me and knows my preferences and will be able to book me right away. A great story for me, last year there was a major snowstorm in Chicago. I was in Atlanta driving to the Hartsfield airport, and I knew there was a snowstorm, and my travel agent knew there was a snowstorm. So we got on the phone with each other right away, and she booked me on a number of flights after the one I was on, and then also booked a hotel for me as a fallback. And I did indeed end up having to stay at the hotel, and she had already booked me on the first flight out the next morning, so I was covered. If you aren't using a travel agent, and if you have to call the airline directly, you're going to get in a queue. And you're going to be answered first come, first serve, and by that time, a lot of other people have already been in the queue. They will probably have gotten the seats that you wanted on that next flight. So you're right, it all does start with the first thing of travel and making your plan where you're going. And you have a lot of options these days, and will continue to have options. But I always suggest to people, find an option that you're most comfortable with and stick with it.